15 seconds. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Paradise Irrigation District to order, and please have the public and board silence their cell phones, and if you do get a call, please leave the premises before you take it. We don't want to disturb the meeting. Please stand with me and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seth is under the weather, so that's why I'm handling the meeting. Okay, a roll call, please.
Director Canada?
Here.
Vice President Larry Duncan?
Here.
President Seth Kroll is absent. Director Seth Jacobson?
Here.
Director Bill Hall?
Present.
Okay. Approval of the consent calendar. Is there anyone who wishes to remove anything from the consent calendar?
I have a note here, and I need to look at it, Larry.
Okay. Is the James one, is it somewhere else here in the agenda?
It's item.
That's a separate
It's a
agenda
separate
item for
one,
a separate
okay.
annexation.
But we're approving the,
You already approved James, and this is just the formality of adopting a resolution.
oh, okay, good,
It's under the consent calendar.
right. But there isn't another place for James to talk?
No.
Does he wish to talk? Do you wish to talk to your? No. Oh, okay, very good, okay. Okay, I'd entertain a motion. Have you found it yet?
Yeah, I have it. It was in the LAFCO exhibits for this annexation, and I think it was on page 35. Well, I'm going to have to go back to the front and look. It's got some stuff in there with my signature on it, dated from 2007 or 9. Is that just a sample? I didn't quite understand why it's in there.
You're referring to the resolution authorizing the president of the board to sign the master property tax account agreement with Butte County, and that's one of the requirements that they want that included in the annexation.
So it's not a mistake.
It's just an exhibit. It's one of the exhibits.
This
No, it's
exhibit.
not a mistake.
Okay.
That's fine.
That was it.
Board president.
All right.
Okay,
Vice president.
I'd entertain a motion.
I move we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second that. Second. Been moved and seconded. Anyone in the public like to speak about the consent agenda? Seeing none. All those in favor? Oh, roll call, please.
Director Hunt?
Yes.
Director Jacobson?
Yes.
Director Pella?
Yes.
Vice President Duncan?
Yes. Passes 4-0 with one absent. Okay, public participation. Individuals will be given an opportunity to address the board regarding matters not scheduled on the agenda. Although the board cannot take action on any matter not on the agenda, comments will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Opportunity for the public comment on agenda items will be provided at the time they are discussed by the board, with comments limited to 5 minutes per agenda item. Anyone wish to speak to something that is not on the agenda? Ward.
Two things not on the agenda. Thank you. Good evening, board. Yes, first to explain why I was not here last month, item 6 on your agenda referred to the recall. I was fed up with it. I thought I've had enough. I'm not coming that night. That's what I told people. Tonight I'm here, though, to represent Love Paradise and Make a Difference Day. Make a Difference Day is in honor of Arlen Hudson, who used to sweep and clean our gutters, basically for nothing, in lieu of having somebody from Public Works at the town of Paradise do that. The third Saturday or the fourth Saturday of every October, over 20 years now, has been Make a Difference Day. It's a national event. Because of that, the town of Paradise and several organizations around town, some of which are represented on the back of my shirt, are participating in activities that will make a difference in our town. Paradise Garden Club has done this for a few years. 2 years ago, the town of Paradise did it by re-roofing the police station. This year, they've accumulated a staff of people who will be participating in a wide variety of projects throughout our town, some of which are public and some of which are private, some of which are business organizations that have great street frontage and need a little cleanup. Frankly, I think this is a great opportunity for PID to participate. Now, you're not in it early enough to get your name on the back of the shirt, but I think it'd be great if Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, Friday at the depot, somebody wearing a PID shirt or a hat would show up just to support this activity and say, hey, we're behind you too. Even if you don't want to pick up a shovel or a broom or a rake, at least to be there to acknowledge this is a good idea in our town. The spin-off of this is, and I've been involved with this in other communities for a few years, it's not cleaning up the town that makes a difference. It's the impact that excited people have on other people when they see them doing something good for our town. When you spin that off, guess what? We get a better community. Who can deny having that? Thanks for your time.
What was the date? Friday?
This Friday it starts. It goes through the weekend.
Through the weekend at what time?
8 o'clock. If you're there at 8, you'll get breakfast.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to something that isn't on the agenda? Okay, we'll move on to audit presentation.
Yeah, I can introduce it. Again, this is our annual audit. Heidi Coppin's here from Tittle & Co. to present the annual audit. So I'll turn it over to Heidi.
Thank you, Kevin. Good evening. I'm Heidi Coppin, and I'm one of the partners at Tittle & Company in Chico. We performed the annual independent audit for the district for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2016. It's been a pleasure working with your staff. Kevin always does an excellent job of pulling together all of the information that we need for the audit. And because of that, actually, we're here to present the final audit report to you just a little over 3 months after year end, so we're really happy about that. We issued an unmodified opinion on the audit, which means that the financial statements are materially correct in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The financial statements are the responsibility of management, and also maintaining an effective internal control system is the responsibility of management. Properly designed internal controls help reduce the likelihood that errors or fraud will occur in the financial statements and not be detected. Management's responsible for designing those internal controls, and the board is responsible for authorizing and overseeing that those controls have been implemented by management. We made one adjustment to the financial statements, which we normally do every year at the request of Kevin, and that is to adjust the liability for the retirees' health insurance costs. And that adjustment was about $115,000. So we did increase the liability for that amount. The district was able to meet its debt covenants for last fiscal year, even though there has been the deficit spending, operating losses the last 2 years. Those covenants were met. And with the rate increase that was implemented in the last quarter of the fiscal year, it appears that the district will be rebounding in the next year. And we are pleased to report that we don't have any audit findings or significant issues that arose during the audit that we need to discuss with you. So at this point, are there any questions I can answer as it relates to the audit report?
Yeah, I have some
Yes, Ken.
questions. First of all, is there a better opinion than an unmodified
No, there's not.
opinion?
No.
I just wanted to make sure I knew what the score was.
Yeah, there's actually three.
Through F or something like that?
You could say that. An adverse opinion would be basically we're saying you cannot rely on these financial statements. That would be an adverse opinion. There's also a modified opinion, which means the financial statements are basically correct except for certain issues. And then an unmodified is that the financial statements are materially correct. So that, yes, that's the best opinion you can get.
Good. then the next item that you brought in was something that you mentioned, Kevin asked that you do this. But you say the following material misstatement was corrected as requested by management.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, why do we wait for you to adjust this? Is this something that we don't have the magic formula for?
No, the reason why is because it's an actuarial calculation that is performed, and normally we get the number when they're here because we're waiting on it's part of a financial statement disclosure. So what I do is I give them the trial balance early on, and then I just wait for them to bring back that financial disclosure, and then that's when we basically talk it over, and then that's when we come with the adjustment. So that's why I always wait for them to make the adjustment.
Okay. Well, what I wanted to bring up here and make sure that I understood properly was that this was not an oversight. It's just our practice.
It's been our practice since it's been implemented.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And then just one last kind of a general topic. You confuse me over and over and over because I think I've got 3 of the same letters throughout this thing, and it drives me crazy.
Throughout the course of the 1-year audit, the different letters.
Yeah, well, they seem like they're all the same letter to me. There might be a modification somewhat, but I don't it sounds like you're just repeating yourself often, and I was kind of wondering why.
Well, we're required, before we start the audit, what we consider the planning phase, we're required to communicate with the board. So there are certain times that we are required to communicate with the board. So the first time, well, the very beginning, you have an engagement letter that actually management signs engaging us for the audit. And then the board gets what we call a planning letter. And that's basically just saying, we're going to be performing the audit. We're going to perform the audit in accordance with government auditing standards and generally accepted accounting principles. And this is when we expect to do the audit. This is when we expect to finish the audit. So it's more just kind of putting you on alert, I guess, that the audit's starting. And then when we're conducting the audit, we're also required to have a meeting with one of the board members. So we send a letter expressing our need to interview one of the board members. That may be the next letter that you're thinking about. And then this basically, it's all said and done, and then this letter that you see here on the iPad, page 83, this is where we're communicating to you after the audit is said and done, any significant audit findings or issues come in this letter. So
Your first letter is the overall report card, the one that's at the beginning of this presentation.
The board letter. The board letter is and then you have
Yes.
and then you have the opinion letter, and then you have the internal control letter.
That's what I'm confused with. The opinion letter just kind of restates the board letter, so I think.
yeah, so the board letter that's on the screen, these are communications to management. And these are basically just going over if we had any significant issues, disagreements with management. There's certain things that are required to be communicated in that letter. That goes to the board of directors.
In that style and format?
In that style and
Okay.
format. It's standard boilerplate sort of language. And then in your actual audited financial statements, you have on the screen now, that's the independent auditor's report. And this is basically our opinion on the audit of the financial statements. That stays with the financial statements and gets distributed with the financial statements to anybody who requests or needs to see the audit. And a copy of that goes to the state controller's office, the audited financial statements.
That letter.
Yep, another one.
And that also stays with the financial statements. And this is a report on the internal controls of the district.
Yes.
On page 84, 2 of us are curious what the capital RSA means under other matters.
Says unaudited for RSI. I'm curious what that is.
Let me see which page.
84. There you go. You have it on the screen? And it'd be other matters, RSA at the bottom.
Oh,
RSA,
required supplementary information, which we record as RSI. So that's a schedule that's required to be included in the audited financial statements. And in this case, this is the schedule related to the retirees' health care benefits.
That's where we have to project our expenses forward for what we're.
Yeah, that required schedule has the actuarial determined liability, and then if you've set aside any money for that, that's on that schedule. It's in, let me find that, Kevin. See what iPad page it is there in the financial statements.
Is that it, or is it?
No, it's a little, it's further, right here.
Page 118.
Yeah, it shows you the last two actuarial dates, July 1, 2010, July 1, 2013, and what the actuarial determined liability is for those retiree health costs. And you don't have a trust or any assets set aside specifically for that, so it's all unfunded.
That's unfunded?
Mm-hmm.
It's a long-term liability that's unfunded.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
haven't funded it in the past then?
We've made a decision as a board. We made a decision to fund it as pay as you go. So as retirees retire, we pay their health insurance as we go. So right now we have four retirees, and we're paying their health insurance through operations. The other way you would do it would be to set aside monies, and then as they retire, then you would pull that money out of a trust and not pay it as you go. You would pay it out of that trust. So the board's decided that, and the district under industry-wide norms, we have a very low unfunded liability calculation because our retiree health benefits are capped. So there's a calculation that has to be made before you're able to get them, and then once you reach Social Security, you're no longer getting them. Unlike other agencies, you get them for life, and I believe the vesting is 5 years to get them for life on a lot of agencies.
Like, I was curious about the fact that it says that they did not audit that. It was information provided, but it was not audited.
So they're taking the actuarial numbers, and they're not basically
Right.
not
We're not auditing
his
the actuary.
calculation. You're relying on his expert numbers.
Correct.
So then it's being budgeted each year.
We budget each year in the benefits side.
Right. Any other questions, Cliff?
No, that was the only question I had.
Bill?
Not so far.
That's it?
No, are we through the presentation?
Yes.
That's it?
I think so.
I'd like to point out one thing in the MD&A that the district did under the financial highlights. The district's net operating revenues decreased by a percentage from last year, but our operating expenses actually decreased almost 6%. So it shows that the district had made a conscious effort to cut costs through this low time of almost $445,000. So
I actually noticed that.
So I think that's that's something that we need to be proud of.
Any more questions, Bill?
No, I
Okay.
guess not.
Anybody for the public has any questions for our auditor? Yeah, I have one question. Were you able to look at our reserve policy?
I just looked at it briefly when I got here this evening, so I wasn't able to, digest all the nuances of it. But I think having a reserve policy is an excellent idea, whether it be for operating reserve or future capital items or contingencies. So I think it's a great idea. It actually had a lot of categories in here, so I didn't have time to look through all of them in detail. But in concept, I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Then I'd entertain a motion.
I move we accept the auditor's report as presented.
Second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's see. We don't have anybody here for anything else. Okay, let's do the approval of the checks.
Before we start the checks, I'll throw myself on the sword. I forgot to bring the bids. So if there is something that you want to see bids, I will make sure that I get copies of it and send it out. But it's been kind of hectic, and I forgot to get them from all locations. So
Yeah, I was
I'm going
gonna
to throw
ask-
myself on the sword right
I was
now.
gonna ask for one just to test the system.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm throwing myself. So, but if you want to see something, I'll make sure it gets out immediately tomorrow.
They have been filling them out, though.
Oh, absolutely, yes. And
Hey,
you can
Bill?
you can test the system by pulling one. I'll go up and get it, and I'll get it to you guys tomorrow if that's your preference.
Okay, Bill, do you have any questions on the check register?
Cedar Creek Publishing,
Page?
127. And
It's on
since
page
they're-
127. Yeah,
and since they're here, you don't need a book to look up.
that's right.
I'm just curious because it amounted to water conservation education for $11,641. That's the biggest bill I've seen, I think, for Cedar Creek. I know they do excellent work, but I'd like an explanation.
January.
4 months. Okay.
You're sneaking up on it?
Thank
They
you.
knew we were short of funds, so they were,
They've been carrying a note for us for that amount. They didn't charge us interest.
no interest. Right. They knew we were having financial difficulty. I do that with my clients also.
Are those new glasses, Larry?
No, these are just reading glasses.
Oh, I see.
My eye doctor says that I'm abnormal. I
Well-
don't need glasses at my age.
I'm going to pass on that. That was too good of an opportunity, but I won't say anything.
And the note is that we featured the 10% decrease, so that's, they've been wasting all the way through all of 2016, knowing that the district is facing back in January. We cut our hourly rate, you guys have
Thank you. Bill, any others?
No,
That's it?
that's it.
Cliff?
Well, I have one item, I'm not gonna question, I'm just gonna bring it to focus so that, my closing remarks you'll remember that we just spent $15,000 on more Fireflies to replace the, ones that were failing. And, that's just a comment, and then on closing remarks, I'll bring it together.
Okay,
That's the only question I have.
that's the only one? Okay.
I have none.
Jim? Okay, let's see if I had any. Relative, I had Kevin, I was asked about the boots, why they were in a different category, and he explained it to me. But I have none either, so I'll entertain a motion. Oh, does the public have any questions? No. Okay.
For this
I'll
motion.
make one comment on page 134. The largest expense of any on there is $526,000. That's half of the annual debt service that we'll be paying this year, paid on one payment. So just a little heads up there.
US Bank.
That's why you're seeing the huge amount this month, is because it's that one time, once a year payment that
Annual
we
payment.
make.
Okay.
I move that we approve general check fund check numbers 48783 through 49888 for the month of September 2016, totaling $854,757.17, exclusive of voided check numbers 49787 and 49883, and authorization of a similar amount allowing or adjusting for extraordinary budget or board-approved items during the month of October 2016.
Second that.
Second. Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 4-0. Old business, continued from the September 21st board meeting. Annexation agreement of out-of-district amount, Pennington. Review and consider approval to authorize the general manager to execute an annexation agreement with the Penningtons for property located at 4875 Round Valley Ranch Road.
Oh, Joe Pennington is not here.
I sent.
Did we contact him?
For the
Oh. Did not hear back from him.
I'm a little reluctant to take an action unless we know whether it's worth it or not. I'm not,
Table it again until next month.
what is
Oh,
that?
The question was, there's no time crunch, and I don't think there is. Your action is to discontinue
Yeah,
delivery of out of service or out of district service until, I think, effective December 31st.
so if he doesn't come to the table, we cut him off on water on December 31st?
That's what the motion.
But you can always extend it based on a.
Well, I know Joe somewhat. We're in the same business. So I've got his business card around somewhere. I think I can chase him down and ask him what's going on, rather than just bring it up, make a motion, accept it, and then come to find out they wanted something different or.
My recollection from George's description of this last month was he's got a much larger parcel than Mr. James. And even if you waive the district's fees, there would still be a fairly hefty Board of Equalization and LAFCO fee.
Yeah, but not unruly. I think that the one that we passed was about 4,000. This for Pennington's about 8,000 or 9,000 or so. So anyhow, I would recommend we table it for next month, and I will make an effort and actually talk to him on the telephone and say we need to see you down here, or water's going bye-bye.
It talks about James too. In the
Well, his was
write-up.
approved.
I know it was on the consent calendar, but it did say that he was wanting a reduction too. But that's why I was asking if, I know it's been approved, I just was wondering if he wanted to speak to that. What was that last?
Yeah,
I'm looking at 6A. Is this September? Oh, it's the September 15th. Okay, forget it. Okay, then we'll table this till next month. New business, Paradise Irrigation District Reserve Fund Policy.
Yeah, I can take this. This has been an effort that's been going on for a long time. I think it's appropriate to bring to the board at this point because we're finally having an opportunity maybe to reserve funds going forward. Recently, we've been just taking from reserves, so hopefully now we'll be filling up reserves. I apologize for for the new one that came out, and there is a printed copy on your desk. There's not a lot of substantial changes to it. There's just some cleanup of stuff that I missed, and a lot of that's just kind of making things consistent throughout, and then making sure that each one of the fund reserves has a trigger point, meaning when are we going to put monies in there, or how are we going to take monies out. So I can just start off that a reserve policy is a good business practice. It's not required to have it, but I think it's good business practice for a government agency that's collecting monies and reserving them to have a plan on what to do with those monies, and to have priorities on which reserves you're going to fill up first, and what those reserves are for. So the introduction kind of talks about that, the objectives of it, because kind of talks about that also, that we're fiscally sound, flexibility, stabilization of rates, stabilization of the district in itself, being able to ebb and flow with weather changes, being able to ebb and flow with emergencies. So having monies available if something catastrophic was to happen, that we have money available to go out and do what we need to do to keep the district online. The board is in control of the reserves. They're in control of how they're spent, how they're reserved, where they go, how you direct staff on how they're allocated out is board policy, and it's done through budgeting, and it's also done through the purchasing policy. So let's say we have a new tank, and we come to you and say, do you want to do a new tank? Yes, we do as a board. Therefore, under that purchase, we are going to use long-term capital reserves. So that's a direction of the board of how those are used. The budget would also kind of include something like that. How are we going to budget these capital projects, and then where are these capital projects going to be funded from? Okay, or that type of thing. We're in a major drought last year, but we don't want to raise rates. Therefore, we're going to supplement our rates by the rate stabilization fund or the drought fund. Those are decisions that the board would make under this reserving policy. So the finance committee worked very hard on this. We went through many iterations of it. And then on page 2, what you see of the reserve policy is kind of what the finance committee recommended as kind of a priority of reserves, and also percentages to target for. So what I want everybody to see is that this right here is our base calculation for the targets of these. So we're talking, so for the operating fund, just for example, we're estimating that we want to have a minimum target of 17% of operating budget, including debt service and pipeline. So that's kind of how this chart works. Down here in the water stabilization, we want 10% of budgeted water revenue. So service consumption revenue. So 10% we're looking to as a minimum of our calculation. Again, 25% of operating budget, including debt service and pipeline, 25% of just consumption revenue for the drought. Accumulated depreciation, it means the current accumulated depreciation or 100% of the current or the accumulated depreciation, and then 10-year capital. So long-term capital fund would have 10% of our 10-year capital plan or 100% of it as a maximum. And then they set priorities. So they said, well, first we're going to fill up operating. Second, we're going to fill up water stabilization fund. Third, we think is most important is to fill up the emergency reserve fund. Fourth, the drought. Fifth, equipment. Sixth, long-term capital. Doesn't mean that's how it's got to go. The board has complete control over this in any way they would like, but this is just kind of a guideline of how this reserve policy would work.
Can I ask a general question?
Sure.
So the expenses of the district, the day-to-day operation is met by the fees that we bring in for the water that we distribute, and the reserve funds are an addition to that, which means that they are basically an increase of revenues that we are presently getting.
No.
Hang on a second. So if we've got $1 coming in and we're only supposed to charge $1 for the services, not make a profit, then we set up all these reserve funds. That's additional revenue coming in. I see that as an increase in the cost of water. So it's an area I would like to tread lightly on because of the past issue of transparency and raising rates inappropriately, or so the public thought inappropriately. So I would want to make sure that these reserve funds that we decide we're going to start collecting money for are appropriate, so that it doesn't look like we're collecting money in excess of what we needed, and so now we're finding slush funds to stick it in so that people don't think we're charging them more money than what it costs to give them the water. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I can answer that question. So,
Okay.
And currently, I'll just back up, but currently our rate structure is we have a service charge, we have a consumption charge, and we actually have a debt service charge, and we have a reserve charge. So we're currently inside of our rate structure is a reserve charge in there to build reserves.
So the monies that are coming from that revenue, the reserve portion is all that's being used and it's being spread out into these accounts?
It is. So what's happening is it's being collected in, and it's not a perfect science. So let me just tell you that, because you have variability of revenue. So just because we say we're going to collect this amount of consumption revenue doesn't mean you're going to. It could be high, it could be low, and right now it's low. So a portion of the reserve revenue has to supplement your loss in consumption revenue. So there's already monies of reserves, technically, and this is all very theoretical, right? But technically you're already spending reserves to supplement operations because you're coming short on your estimated consumption revenue.
Well, I guess the main point I wanted to bring out was that I wouldn't want to see that shortly down the road, we raise rates again to have the revenue to cover the reserve categories that we created.
Right, but and you brought up a very negative thing when it comes to government accounting, which was slush fund, right? Slush funds are bad, right?
Right.
This gets you out of slush funds. This creates those funds that this board is earmarking monies for. This is representing, okay, we're going to collect these monies for a specific purpose that this board feels is necessary. If the board doesn't feel it's necessary, then that's where you guys have the power. You have the power to return that money to the customer and say, we don't think we need this money. We don't think that we need to have 10% of our long-term capital plan in reserves. So therefore, we're not going to fund that portion of our reserves.
So if a reserve fund grows disproportionately, we can't just take it and stick it in another fund. At that point, we have to return it?
No, if you were to max out every one of your reserve funds and have just an abundance of money flowing over to you, then it could look like that you're just stockpiling money, and that could be an issue. I think it would be an issue. But if you have monies that you're reserving for a specific issue that you've identified inside of a policy that has priorities, and let me just back up too, there's two types of reserves. There's designated, or as we call them, unrestricted reserves, non-restricted reserves, and then there's restricted reserves. So non-restricted reserves are reserves that the board has. They have carte blanche on how they like to earmark that money. If they want to put every dime into long-term capital fund, that's your guys' decision.
But then we could take those funds back out and put them in another fund if we wanted to.
As a board, that's correct. Okay. Then there's restricted reserves. Those funds you have no control over. Those funds are earmarked for specific things. I wouldn't say you don't have control over them. There's requirements that are inside there that must be met before they can be expended. Capacity fees are a great example of reserve funds that you guys kind of have control over. Do you want to spend them on a project that qualifies, or don't you want to spend them on a qualified project? Bond reserve funds, you don't have control over. Those are specific for either the last debt service payment, or if the district goes and can't make their payments, then they would take that money and use it to make the bond payment. So those you don't have kind of abilities to move. So those are the two types, and those two are identified in this policy. So the top 6 are the non-restricted reserves. Those are the ones that you guys have control over. And however you would like to do those and however you would like to see those filled, that's your guys' choice. But if you do decide to fill them, this is your guidelines of why you're filling them, how they get filled, and how they get spent.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the overall process is that in our rate structure, we have structured for charging our clients and collecting some monies for reserves. At the end of the budget year, when we see how much we actually have, first of all this money comes in and it just goes into the operating fund. That's the holding bucket. At the end of the year, the board gets together and says, okay, we exceeded plan, we didn't exceed plan, this is where we are, this is how much money we've collected based upon our formulas, And are we going to take all that money? Now we're going to decide whether we want to reserve all 6 of those items in an equal manner, or like what we had thought was more like a fill a bucket, and then when it's full, like the most urgent one, the operating fund, then it spills over and we populate into the water rate stabilization fund, and maybe in the 2 or 3 years that's full, and then it spills over and we build up the next fund. Or we do it however the board wants. Or like you said, the board can say, you know, we got some issues over here, we need to take money out of this reserve fund and use it in a different area.
But this is a responsible thing that you're doing to basically show the public that the increase that they got is being put in a good place.
And it's ready for future expenses that are going to be, you know, real probably.
Okay.
And later on in years, if the board decides that the targets were too high, for example, the maximum, then fine. You know, you either do a rate decrease or a rate stabilization for several years and let it deplete down to where we think it is. Like Kevin said, it's not a science. We're trying to do the best we can, come up with some targets that seem to be common sense,
Okay.
and then we go from there.
I think Bill had a question.
When this came out to the directors as an early warning thing, I replied, and my replies are on page 146 and 147 to this, where I asked for, these funds are all set there, but I'll just read from the first one because they're all very similar. Let's see, wait a minute, I marked one in here, maybe it isn't the first one. Yeah, it's operating fund, number 4 under operating fund. It states, the district manager / chief financial officer is authorized to approve the expenditure of operating funds without prior approval of the board of directors in response to day-to-day cash flow requirements. And I look upon this as an end run around the board, that the board approves a budget and then you're free to spend it. It doesn't say anything that you're going to stay within the bylaws that say George can spend up to $5,000 and an emergency is $25,000. It just says funds. So how about an explanation?
Sure. Yeah, this does not circumvent the purchasing policy by any stretch. This is a guideline of how funds are collected. The reason why that is in there is just, I think this month is a great example. You saw that there was $800,000 of monies that we spent this last month, and we brought in $300,000, okay? We had to take out monies out of reserve to pay for that day-to-day operation or that debt service, which was the biggest one, which was pre-authorized through the acceptance of the debt when we went out and issued it and knew that we had these payments that were going to come forward. So that was an example of why we have the language in there. Nowhere in this does it say that myself or George would be able to go out and spend beyond our purchasing limits or policy. This is a guideline of how monies are reserved and taken in and out. It's not how monies are spent on specific projects.
You just said we were $500,000 short of meeting our bills.
Well, because of the debt, we had it in the reserve. 500,000 went to pay off our debt. That was in a reserve.
So this month, what I was saying is,
I just want Kevin to explain, Larry.
sure.
I
So
thought he did earlier.
this month, if I'm looking at this month, we brought in $300,000 and we spent $800,000.
Right.
So therefore, we had to take $500,000 out of operating reserves.
Operating what?
Reserves, which was built up in the prior months because at that time we were actually putting money into the operating reserve, so it was being filled up. And then you draw it down due to day-to-day operations because you have one big payment for that year, and then you start filling it back up as the year goes on. So it's the ebb and flows of operations throughout the year.
Did you pull any of the restricted funds?
Nope.
None of the funds that are held for meeting the debt funds?
No.
Okay, I thought we had money in the debt. I
No.
thought we had reserved for that.
No, reserve, that reserve fund is only specifically there for the last payment or if we can't make the payment. So we were able to make the payment, so we didn't have to take it out.
Okay, you forecast how fast will we replace the 500,000?
Forecasting is difficult to say, but I would assume that's probably be a couple. Well, the thing is, we already kind of made some of that up. So there was already some of that already made up based on that we had some high income months this last couple months, July, August, September, and then knowing that that's going to draw it down. So, I mean, by the end of the year, I feel like we will probably be $500,000 ahead this.
In spite of it being a low water use time of the year for
Yeah,
us?
I mean, we estimated 700,000 ahead, so I still think that we'll probably be about 200,000 below our estimates.
But below the budget?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll still be able to make up the 500,000?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because we had that reserve function of our rates that is that cushion now. Now we actually have a cushion in there. Before we had no cushion. So every time we dipped, we were making up with reserves, but we weren't ever going to make that portion up. Now we have a cushion in there that allows us, if we go down, we can go down 700,000 in our budget estimates less than, and we'll still be a net zero on our operating.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion. Put it on the record at least. Whether it even gets a second or not is not important to me. That we, in all these proposed funds, that we strike out wherever it says the district manager, chief financial officer is authorized to approve the expenditure of operating funds without prior approval of the board of directors in response to day-to-day cash flow, and other ones refer to budgets. Did you take the budget part of it out? No? Okay, some others will talk about budget, but I don't think that should be in there. I think it's a backdoor for them to spend money as they need to fill up a hole or whatever.
Anyone want to second that?
Can you clarify that for me, where you're reading that?
What that does is it wouldn't allow him to pay the 500,000 debt, because you were saying he can't go into the operations fund.
Yep.
So
Because it didn't come to
we
the
have a
board.
special board meeting?
We're finding out after the fact that they spent $500,000 because we were in the hole. Big deal. Nothing was said last month,
But
the month before.
the debt had been approved by the board.
Oh, yes, but not for them to have the authority to spend that kind of money.
But we
They
can't.
should come back to the board and beforehand. If you know you're gonna hit that, then you should tell us beforehand.
Okay, so I want to be clear, and because there's public here too, that debt service payments are approved to be paid when the debt service is approved by the board, and the amortization schedule is also approved by the board. It's a commitment that that board makes under resolution to make all payments associated with that debt
I'm
service.
not objecting to that, I can't, but I am objecting that nobody said anything last month that we're gonna have to pull $500,000 out that we possibly would be short.
Just provide
No
Director
information.
Kellogg a copy of the amortization schedule. It'll show every payment when it'll be due under the
That's
debt.
fine.
Yeah, and you present it to us before you do it, that's all.
And just to let you know, it is in the budget. All the amortization schedules are included in the budget.
I'm wondering if we have just maybe a wordsmithing issue here. This item number 4 here, Kevin, I don't know if you could put it on the screen, or if it's the same. Yeah, it is the same. Is what you're getting at that you can essentially transfer funds if necessary for cash flow purposes?
Correct.
So why don't we say that rather than the expenditure of operating funds without prior approval, the transfer of operating funds? I mean, because what you're saying is if Fund A is running low and we've got some debt that we got to pay or some expenditure that we need to make, the board has already approved, you're going to pull funds from the reserve fund into that Fund A to make that payment.
So the way that this is set up is operating fund is the operating fund like your checkbook you would have at your house. Okay. That's how this is set up. So for us to be able to move monies within the operation fund, it's a requirement to run the district. So the operating fund, that's why it kind of says that we have the ability to move money in and out as operations, day-to-day cash flow needs. The water rate stabilization fund is a fund that would be kind of supplemented. You're supplementing your operations by not raising the rates. Okay, so that's your water rate stabilization fund. Therefore, that's why it's through budgeted authorization, is that you're going, okay, we know that we're going to be short this year. Therefore, as we're short, we're able to move money freely out of that water rate stabilization fund to cover operations.
The basic argument is, it's presented in here, in your report, in this thing, that the board is responsible for the money. We're the ones that are responsible to the community for the monies, how they're handled here. We should be informed before anything like this happens that we're getting a past due thing, so that we know and the public that we serve will know about it. This is not transparency, Kevin. This is simply, I'm going to do the business the way I think I should do it, and sorry, it's in the budget. And I'm going, no.
Okay,
I'd like to add something to that. I think I see what Bill's referring to, because I did review the purchasing policy when I wanted to make the changes in prior sessions. And if I'm reading this, basically it is saying that the district manager or CFO is authorized to approve the expenditure of operating funds. That's the same things we just quibbled about on a set of tires maybe, and now we're talking $500,000. And yet we're saying that we're not even going to quibble about that. We're going to give you the authority to just go ahead and do that without asking us first. So I kind of see that
okay,
problem that he has with that.
Okay. I didn't choose to spend $500,000 this year. You guys chose to spend $500,000 this month.
Certainly.
Okay, so I think that we're losing perspective of exactly what it's like. I met payroll this month, right? Did I come to you and ask to meet payroll? No, but we pay the people what you guys decided to set as the contract, right? And that's $65,000, $70,000, $820,000. But we meet payroll every month by going based on the authorization that was given to us by the board. We are paying our debt service every time debt service is available based on the authorization that the board gave us when they decided to take on that debt service.
You're right. If we question this, then we got to question the payroll and everything else. And I see what he's saying.
No, payroll's every month. It's something you can plot. You got your charts and everything. We watch that, we comment on it, but we can see what's going on and we expect that.
Okay, let me ask you
Kevin,
this.
is there not a graph
at
at the back of the book that shows when all these payments are made?
But I want to, what decision would have been made if it was brought to the board last month?
Most of the cases, it'd probably be a rubber stamp.
What decision does the board have?
Huh?
What decision do you have?
None.
What decision would we do? We've already approved doing it.
You guys are obligated to make the payment. You've already obligated yourself to make the payment.
He's just doing what we authorized him to do prior, and he's just staving it off to a certain point.
And why is this put in
Who
the...
pays your bills at home? You or your wife? Does she ask permission to make the house payment?
And
That's basically what this is.
no,
If you want to put in here, and I have no problem.
saying
Okay.
policy.
Okay, I'm gonna let me see if this appeases you. If you want it in here that all purchasing still must be conform to the purchasing policy set, no matter what fund anything is pulled out of, beautiful. That's what this is already saying anyway.
I think you guys are just you're both right. I think you're worried about the terminology. I think we have a wordsmithing issue. That's my view. Go to the operating fund. That's the one I'm looking at. Number 4.
The operating fund
Number 4 on the policy paragraph.
is a checkbook.
The checkbook.
That's
Right.
what we've been doing for the last 100 years. Without calling it an operating fund, that is the checkbook and the bank balance. Money goes in, and some of it
What's your suggestion?
gets put off into categories. And
So
the
what's
rest
the
is-
intent of number 4? The district manager CFO is authorized to approve the expenditure of operating funds without prior approval of the board of directors in
Okay,
response to day-to-day cash flow requirements.
Okay, you're talking about the item number 4, but let's go to I'm going to make this a little easier. Go to a different reserve fund. Go to the equipment replacement fund. Okay? We're going to buy a tractor, and it's going to cost $100,000. Well, first of all, that's brought up a year in advance, brought up to the board. The board discusses it. The board says, you're right, we need to replace that other piece of machinery. We're going to buy that tractor. Right now, what happens, and what happened last year and the year before and the year before and the year before, is that then when we're ready to bid it out, because it's over a certain level, it exceeds our purchasing policy platform, they don't just go out and buy the tractor because it exceeded $25,000. Then they bring it back to the board and said, okay, here's our bids on the tractor. We got a $98,000, $101, $105. We selected the 98, and the money comes out of our checkbook. Now, though, once we ever do get to populate these funds, if there is $215,000 sitting in the equipment replacement fund, then that year, when the managers come up to the board and say we want to budget for a tractor replacement, the board approves it. 7 months later, it's still in excess of the $25,000. Management brings it back to the board and say, here's our bids. What are we going to select to buy? The board makes the decision. And now Kevin moves money on his own authority out. We don't have to make the second decision. It's redundant.
Right.
Then he moves money out of
Right.
the equipment replacement.
I agree
Why
with
don't we
you,
reword this to
but that's
say
not
that
what number
this
5
first-
says. Director Kellogg's concern is number 5 says without prior approval of the board of directors.
Well,
What you
number
just
4.
said is there will be, what you're talking about is a transfer.
We're talking
of
about
funds.
transferring money.
Yes, so let's make that clear. That's why I say there's a wordsmithing issue.
Why don't
He's
we do
saying this is authorizing the purchase without
Yeah.
board approval.
Well, it's not.
You're
Not the
saying
intent.
this is authorizing moving money around in these funds.
Why don't we say
Separate
that
issues.
the district manager or CFO is authorized to approve the disbursement of operating funds for prior approved?
I would strike all of these paragraphs and have one global clause that says management can move funds amongst these various different funds if to satisfy a purchase that's been approved by the board or in accordance with the purchasing policy.
No, I don't want management to move funds from an equipment fund to a long-term capital debt or to the emergency.
But if you've approved the purchase of a $500,000 semi,
Okay?
isn't that what your intent is in these section 5s here or section 4 elsewhere, that
No.
you've made the decision as a board they can go get the funds wherever they want?
Once the board puts the money in the bucket, it's spent just for the bucket purposes, only the bucket purposes. If the board wants to get together and say, look, guys, we depleted our equipment fund, we do need this $500,000 behemoth land mover, we want to take some funds out of this reserve account and that reserve account and that reserve account and move it in and handle this equipment purchase. That's the board decision. That's not management decision. Management gets to spend the money from the buckets we put it into, in my vision, in my opinion, and I think that's what.
Using the purchasing policy.
Correct.
Then what is the purpose of paragraph 5 there under policy? It's
Where- I
your
don't know where
equipment
you're at.
replacement fund number 5.
Okay, that's for a specific fund, the equipment replacement fund. That's so they can spend it. When the board said, okay, now we're buying the tractor,
But then you have a clause without prior approval of the board of directors.
We would approve it. We've all.
no. If it goes over 25,000, this is just what checkbook it comes out of. We still had to approve that expenditure over 25,000.
Do you understand this?
Yeah, and that's why I was saying that we need to put in a clause then just says that this is not circumventing the purchasing policy.
Right, if we put that thing in at the top, that the purchasing policy still governs how this is spent, then there's no problem. And that was the intent.
If we didn't put a statement like that in, then we have to do what Bill wants to do and have the board write every check that ever goes out of here. Or they never get to purchase the equipment.
Or every purchase would then have an approval out of whatever reserve fund
We
they
don't have
would
the
purchase it
statement in
out
here,
of.
then we have to prove
Which
it
is fine.
twice.
I don't care.
I don't know why this wouldn't work. Why can't we simply say, the district manager CFO is authorized to approve the disbursement of operating funds for payment of expenses for prior board-approved items?
Yeah, that's good
Then
words.
do it.
That's how I think the finance committee has described the process, how it would work.
Then why don't we change 4 to be that, and then, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's all I'm asking for. That's it.
Fine with me.
That doesn't make you have to come to us unless you have a new expenditure that wasn't board approved.
Absolutely. I'm fine with that. No, I'm not going to argue with that one. And that was the intent.
That was the intent.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the-
So the intent is actually, that spells out the intent.
Okay, can we approve it?
you're right.
Can
The
we
way it's
approve
worded
this,
is-
or do we need to bring it
Yeah,
back?
the way it's worded, it isn't that one.
No, you can approve it if you want to do some wordsmithing right now. And
Yeah, okay, well,
I think there's similar, slightly different language in every.
But every one will make sure it has that
Same language.
same language in it. That's the consistency that we put in there, is the same languages for every single one.
And that's just for operating funds, that's not for the special, like you were talking about.
Yeah, the reserve funds have
They've got their
specifics.
own restrictions by contract or law.
by state law.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, well then,
Thank you very much.
Yep.
that was our intent, Bill.
Okay.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Go to the public.
Oh, yeah, right, forgot.
What am I,
We got so interested.
chopped ham?
Okay, public, please. I'm new at this job.
Yeah, sure you are. A couple questions. As a district, do we have a general goal of what percent of the budget should be the reserve? 5%, 10%, 25%?
We have,
Kevin?
each one has a percent in it.
Yeah.
A goal.
Yes?
That's what
So
we're,
bring
that's
it
what
up.
we've just established.
Yeah, it's up, see right here?
Trying to establish, Ward.
Those percentages.
Okay. And then the next question is, how does that compare with other similar agencies, water companies? Are we on board with them? Are we more in reserves, less in reserves?
This is benchmark.
Yes? No? What?
We benchmark this off of multiple reserve fund policies out there. I would believe on the minimum side, I think we're pretty conservative, not looking to just stockpile money, where I've seen a little more that are trying to stockpile a little more money on their a lot of their long-term capital plans. I think that we're pretty conservative on that. On the operating fund and the rate stabilization fund, I think we're right in line with almost all of them.
17% basically reflects 2 months. Right?
2 months, yeah, 2 months. And that's
Okay, and then one of them at the bottom, it says it may be invested in something. Is that in earn interest?
Yeah, so each one, the investments were based off of liquidity net needs on each one of those funds. So operating fund would be invested in money markets, LAIF, the local agency investment fund, any type of liquid funds. Rate stabilization fund would be in shorter term funds, where long-term capital would be invested in longer term options based on that you have that ability to kind of forecast when you're going to need those.
Okay, so for instance, the $500,000 in reference this time, was that in a fund that earned interest and you pay a penalty to get it out early?
No, that was actually, right now our checking account is actually doing better than most interest rate accounts right now, because we get fee credits back on our banking fees, and it's 30 basis points of our banking fees we get back. So that's just out of a checking account.
Thank you very much.
One little clarification. Operating funds, Ken referred to it as the checkbook, okay? So there's a difference between operating funds and operating fund reserve account.
No,
Correct.
it's the same.
Well, but I mean, if you're talking about a reserve fund account for category 1 operating expenses, okay? So your checkbook is actually not your checkbook reserve account. Your overdraft protection, so to speak.
In that it's
Correct?
schematic, so let me just say that not each one of these funds will be invested in different bank accounts. So it's schematics when it comes to that. So we could have 5 reserves invested in one investment account.
No. What I was getting at is when you're talking about having the right to use the checkbook for operating expenses, when you dig into the checkbook reserve account, we should stipulate that when we make these statements, they're referring to the reserve portion and not the day-to-day checkbook that you're spending money out of.
No, it is the day-to-day checkbook that you'd be spending money out
There
of.
isn't, the operation fund is where we keep our regular money too. It isn't a separate fund.
No,
It says it's a fund, but
It's your
I get
day-to-day.
that, it all comes out of one checking account.
No, but it's your day-to-day fund. So that is your day-to-day fund. That's how it's set up. So your day-to-day fund, you're pulling in and out of that operating fund all the time. The operating reserve fund is your day-to-day fund.
Right, but you're saying that you're gonna have an operating fund reserve, a minimum of 17%.
Correct.
Okay, and so to get down below that, you're getting into that reserve.
Correct.
And that would require a different authorization for spending that money than your day-to-day expenses. That's the point I'm trying to make.
No. It would still, see, this is the target.
We're hoping that through the prior approval of the board, you would give us that authorization to spend that down, because just like you've given us prior approval to make debt service payments, you giving us that authorization gives us the opportunity to spend down that operating reserve today and continue to build it up throughout the year. But you had given us prior approval.
Right,
to do
but
that.
going back to what Bill was saying, that was my point. You were saying we already do this, we already spend the money day to day out of the checking account, but if you get to the point where you have to dig into that backup, that requires a different, can we do this, than the day-to-day stuff, is the point I was trying to make.
It doesn't require different permission. It's just kind of a warning system that says, hey, we've now depleted our bank balance to less than 2 months of operating revenue.
It's a target, so those 17% are just targets.
We're going to have this bank book. And we decided we're going to acknowledge it and call it an operating fund because it expands up to 100% of what we put in there.
Well, sure, but all your other funds are gonna be in that same
No, because
checkbook too.
those are different because those are going to be set aside from the day-to-day operations.
Once we populate them at the end of the year, it'll take several years for us to really develop this into something that
yeah, the
you're
operating
gonna
fund
see
is
a
the only
flow.
one that.
So the
goes in.
category called operating fund is not going to be like the emergency fund and the drought fund and the long-term capital.
No,
It's different.
yes,
So then why is it in here with the rest of these reserve funds?
because
it is a
it's
reserve.
part of the reserves. You're going to hold money in there. So we're identifying every place we're holding money. So you're going to hold money in your operating reserve.
Okay.
You're going to be holding money here, and so we're trying to identify every location of
We're
money.
basically gonna treat that a little different than the other reserves. So.
Correct.
All right.
'Cause we didn't want to be stuck with saying that every month
Have to have
we're
a
going to
meeting.
have to get together and decide how to transfer the reserves that we collected. You know, and we'll do it once a year, and when we know what our peaks and valleys yielded and we have the money.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
We haven't made a motion yet.
I don't think so.
I move that we accept the, what's its name, Paradise Irrigation District Reserve Fund policy as amended in regard to the wordsmithing of the
Authorization.
authorization.
I'll second that.
Second. Any further discussion?
Did you get Director Jacobs' language, Georgiana?
Want me to read it back to you?
Can you just hand it to me?
Well, it's kind of chicken scratch. I can write it. I'll
Okay.
write it after the,
Okay.
I'll write it down for you.
And we'll get, when he gives it to me, and then you can maybe put it in the minutes.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. BCSDA request for nominations.
Butte County Special Districts Association.
Butte County presently, George and Ken and I are on there.
George and Ken from Paradise Irrigation District, you from LAFCO.
I'm from LAFCO, right? So what they want is nominations for the people who are, term is expiring in December of 2016. And,
It should be explained, we're an enterprise.
I was just gonna say, could somebody
Enterprise
explain?
executive, we're an enterprise district, so.
yes, but we nominate we don't just nominate for enterprise. We nominate for all positions.
If we know of someone or
If we know
want to.
someone who, this isn't voting on it. All we're doing is nominating people to fill the positions. And so right now, Jim Brueggemann,
Bruegger,
and Jim Brinson, and Ken Hunt, and
Dwayne Long.
that's it.
Isn't Dwayne Long right
Dwayne?
there? 2016. Dwayne.
Oh,
Long.
yeah, I missed that, and Dwayne Young. So that, so do we have any nominations?
Is that-
Well, we can't,
Would somebody mind
Running for your
explaining?
What Butte County Special District is?
Yes.
What it started out is a special association that is, that was set up to originally so that we could have a say at what LAFCO does. That's how it was originally set up. And that's why there is a person from LAFCO, myself, on this committee. And so we meet 4 times a year, and we have a general meeting for all members, and
twice a year.
twice a year, and we talk about
Legal issues.
and
It's a place for smaller districts to supplement their needs for information and expertise by rubbing elbows with a larger district like ours. And they bring up some problems and are able to talk. It's a way to pass along information, help out your neighbor in smaller districts. It's a way for smaller districts to get together and have a larger voice by then going to the State of California Special Districts Association, who has a larger voice, legal voice with actual lobbyists at the Capitol.
Are you talking about all districts at large, or just water districts, or what?
Special districts.
all special districts in Butte
So
County.
special are different. You know, the town council is not a special district. That's a
Right.
different form of government. Okay.
So it includes
So it could be
Parks and Rec.
cemetery districts, parks and rec, sewage, recreation, water, irrigation, I don't know, mosquito abatement.
Isn't there 58 of them? Oh, wait, no, I'm getting mixed up with Cal.
But I think it's a big
58
number,
is
like
county.
36 or something like that.
Right. Unfortunately, the smaller districts don't take advantage of this. It's run basically by the 4 big districts. And they pay their dues, but they only participate when we have a general membership.
We try to
We try to encourage
get them in.
Yeah. It's for a while it looked like it was going to cease to exist, and then everyone got interested in it again, and so now when I first went on board many years ago, it was meeting monthly, and then one of the new people came up and said, well, it's not necessary to meet monthly, so now we meet quarterly, and since then we've had very poor attendance. But I think it's
funny.
it's a needed thing, but the people who need it the most aren't using it, unfortunately. So we're trying to get them to do it.
About every other year, or maybe every third year, we have a actual board agenda item of saying whether should we disband this or should we continue on and offer this communication and services back and forth. And so every time we've gotten to that point, people have decided to stay together and continue on.
See, the LAFCO not all LAFCOs have a special district representative. And this sort of pushed them into, so that they do now have 2 representatives from special districts that that are on the board. So it really helped get that going. And what I do as a LAFCO member, I report to them what LAFCO's done, as I do here. So right now, at one time we had 3 of our guys on there, and then they said, well, that might be a.
We got 3.
No, George isn't elected.
We got you and Ken and George.
Right, but George isn't elected, so he doesn't have to worry about the Brown Act.
Did we ever have 3? Who
At one time, several years
Go to the
before you
dinner,
came
they have a
aboard.
nice dinner once a
Yeah,
year.
it is not a conflict of interest because we don't talk.
It's a meeting.
PID,
It's a Brown Act problem.
right, it wasn't really because we don't talk.
You shouldn't.
Yeah, we didn't.
Wasn't it you, Ken, and Rick Hall?
No, Ken wasn't here when it happened
Yeah, Rick Hall was in there once,
for a while.
but I think he replaced me. I kind of went out and he went in.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
It's been a while. Well, we had one board that said they don't want to belong to it, and they quit going. And then when I was elected, the board decided to go back to it.
Are we looking for nominees from the audience or from the board here?
No, be from the board.
Okay, well, I myself have my hands full just learning how to operate correctly on this board. So
Well, it might
until I
help.
get
You'd
up
be
to
surprised how
speed
much,
here.
you'd be surprised how much I'm on LAFCO, I'm on Cal LAFCO, I'm on this, and you're surprised at how much knowledge, insight knowledge.
I work 60 to 70 hours a week besides here. I'm pretty full.
Well, you're not the only one.
What are you doing between midnight and 4 a.m.?
Sleeping.
Okay, well, is there any, I nominate Ken Hunt.
Oh, no, I don't. I would think that we should not nominate any board member who is up for election.
Oh, up for the other election.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know, just because
Yeah,
you don't know.
Okay, I guess that's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Because I can't remember when this is, when we vote on this. Does it come in and get voted on in what, November or December? November? Yeah,
So
so
it's at the same time.
we'll see, I'd still be here, but it could be a futile effort, so I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay, that's a good thing.
Although I don't mind doing it to Dwayne Long, I think we ought to get him back. He's always a great board member there.
Yeah, well, that's the important thing is we get people who show up too.
Yeah.
Because it's, if
And
we
he's
don't
not an elected person, he's the manager.
yeah, he's the manager. Okay.
So I would nominate Dwayne Long
For
for another
Enterprise?
term, yes, for the enterprise.
Okay. Any other suggestions? None of you want, Bill, you don't want to?
No, I got enough things to do.
And I think we should, South Feather should always have a presence on the board. So unless I would nominate Jim Edwards, and if South Feather, nominates somebody else, we can always vote for the other person.
His term
His
is
term isn't up.
Yeah.
Jim
I thought he
Edwards
was-
isn't up.
2017.
Oh, yep, I was reading the wrong place.
Yeah.
Wayne, you already nominated him.
Dwayne, we already nominated.
And Mike Trinka is retiring.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
not good.
What
retired.
about Galton?
Oh, he goes till
We don't have to
17
fill them
anyhow.
all. Yeah. What about Jim? Is Jim? I forget.
Yeah, Jim Brueggemann is a good person.
Yeah.
I would nominate Jim Brueggemann also.
Okay, he would be non-enterprise. Right. Okay. Okay, so we got nobody for the,
I think he's gone. Is Jim
Yeah.
Johnson
I don't think we should pin the tail on George. Well, he's not. He's got another year there
yeah, he's
anyhow.
okay too.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. Any other suggestions? None? We don't have to make a motion or anything, right?
Or for our nominations, I don't know.
I would. So
Good.
there's what I heard is a motion to nominate Dwayne Long for Enterprise and
Jim Brugman.
For non-enterprise.
Brugman.
Okay. I'll second that motion.
I think that was Director Hunt.
That was yours, and I'll second it. Any further discussion? Anybody in the public wish to speak to this item? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No,
You're against it? Okay, 3-1.
I'm not gonna nominate somebody who I don't even know
Oh, okay, that's
for
fine.
a position I know nothing about.
Well, you didn't nominate him.
That's
You were
very
just going to vote on him.
irresponsible, I think.
Yeah, we're just nominating, we're not voting on them. Okay, passes 3-1. Okay, well, we don't need a meeting duration thing. It's a little early for a break. Is there some-
Let's get our committee reports going.
Right, let's see, we did that tabled, okay, so then, committee reports. Butte Local Agency Formation, that's me. Okay, we met on the 6th of October, and we had a very interesting public hearing, and it was about the county service area municipal service reviews. And this was done in-house by our staff at LAFCO, and it's on our website at LAFCO and also on Butte County if you want to look at it. It's very interesting. There's 69 of them, and this is the first time I think it's been done in many years, and we approved it. And it's quite lengthy. It's over almost 700 pages, and that was the main thing. Let's see. And then we had executive report. Cal LAFCO is meeting at the end of the month, and they are the ones for the whole. They organize all the LAFCOs together. There's 58 LAFCOs in California. That's my report. Finance Committee report. Ken Hunt.
Okay, well, I'll just gloss over it again. We met in September to discuss the reserving policy. We were doing the fine tuning and tinkering. Clearly, we didn't fine tune it enough. Yeah, because and you know, when we get something in our head and an idea about knowing how it works, we maybe tend to overlook the actual verbiage there that might proclaim an issue. So in the future, I think we'll watch our wordsmithing a little bit better.
I don't know. Well, you watch it awful good.
Oh, I missed that.
You're a lot
I like
better
that
than
new
me.
term, wordsmithing.
Yeah,
That's a lawyer term.
that's a job. Okay, Water Conservation Committee. Bill.
We met and talked about the gardening around here, and Ward, who's been very helpful with the garden club up here. A lady came from the garden club instead and talked to us about what was going on and referred to Ward more times than I can count. And afterwards, the meeting, Jim Madrini and myself and the lady went up and looked at the garden and talked more about it and the water and how to do it. And it looks like it may be a drip system with bushes that are very hardy and are flowering for pollination effects with bees. And there's some other ideas, but at least we talked about it and have some general direction. And the next meeting, maybe we'll actually have some action item that would come to the board on spending money for it. And it was a very friendly meeting, and we got along fine. I was trying to think.
Did we do anything about the open house thing?
Didn't do a thing about it. That's George's baby, and George didn't say a word. Or was he even here?
He wasn't there. Right.
And so we didn't talk about it. I didn't bring it up because George is the one that's been talking about doing something. I thought he'd have something to tell us, but he wasn't there.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is General Manager's report. Are you going to add anything
You have
to his
George's
report?
written report.
We haven't written it very.
I don't know if there's any more that I can add to it. We did switch from the bypass to Magalia Reservoir this last week, and so we've been getting some calls about some water odor issues.
Oh, we're using Magalia?
Yeah, so we switched over to Magalia, but then we switched back. We were, because they were expecting so much rain, they wanted to draw it down.
right.
To free up some space. So there was some taste and odor issues that came through, so the office was taking a lot of those calls and assuring people that it was still safe and that it was going to change over. And so that was one issue that I've been dealing with since they have. Yeah, they switched back. I think they switched back over the weekend or on Monday. I forget. But they did switch back. Yeah. But it takes a while for it to kind of get through.
So, excuse me, but do we only draw out of the Magalia Reservoir when we need to control its height limit? We don't normally do a mix.
Costs money to pump it out of
Yeah,
Magalia.
I know, but I'm just wondering if we couldn't use the water and hide the odor and the algae bloom stuff. It's more of a summer issue.
It's just a
this time of
stagnation.
year.
It's just so low that you're not getting that turbulence to kind of mix things up. Where that turbulence is coming down that creek and going into that bypass. First of all, you're getting better water quality, which they saw when they put that in. They had a hard time treating it because the water quality was so good, and then you're not pumping it, so it just makes operational sense to continue to take it out of there.
That body of water is only going to get worse as it cycles up in solids because of evaporation and growth. And the only way we're going to fix that is, well, short term, is to get that cogen thing we were talking about going and make it economical to run water down in there
And pump it back
pump it back up to
create
Lake Oroville,
electricity.
because now we're recirculating
Yeah.
You mean the lake?
both
Paradise.
bodies of water.
You
and we
said
don't
Lake
have it-
Oroville, you meant
Paradise Lake.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
We knew.
Because what you're ending up with is just like in your distribution system, when you have a dead
Yeah.
leg,
Yeah.
you get sedimentation and growth, and you have to flush it out. And basically, you know that for the distribution, the lake is no different. And if you don't flush it out, it's just gonna continue to get worse.
Does anybody ever check the bottom of Magalia Reservoir?
I don't know if anybody
For
has.
bodies.
The bottom?
Probably just full of dirt,
No, not for bodies.
fish poop, and
No, I was just thinking,
Probably a car.
we have to keep it at a certain level. Could we clean it out and then we'd have more water?
no.
You can't.
And you got to keep water in there first of all because you have release requirements. that you gotta-
Right. I know we can't drain it.
The only thing that makes sense is to bring it back into the system somehow, make it economical to do that, and to move it so that it doesn't become stagnant, basically.
Even if we could just generate enough income off of the recirculation to pay for the cost of pumping it back up there, it would be a benefit to the clients because it would improve
Absolutely,
the odor
because-
and taste.
What value does it have as backup if every time you switch to it, you get enough complaints where you gotta switch off? Then
Well-
it has no value.
It has value in that it's a water source, and just if dire straits, you would
We'll use it.
use it. Sorry, it stinks, but we're gonna use it.
As long as we have reserves in Paradise Lake, you're not gonna use it until we fix that problem.
It's definitely the backup of the backups.
I've
You
got
ever smell it at your place? Because you use a lot of water.
I got well water too.
I use so little water, I never see any odor changes.
I've asked for years whether there's and maybe Cliff can answer the question. Is there a safe fungicide we can use in the summer when the algae's blowing? Because that's when you could kill it.
Copper.
Copper sulfate? That's what I've mentioned in the past, and I was told that there's no way we could use copper sulfate there.
Why?
Can you dump copper sulfate into a waterway? Can you dump copper sulfate into a waterway?
We can't just dump it in, you gotta apply it
Permit.
correctly.
You gotta get a permit.
But copper sulfate is used for potable water treatment for algae.
But is it permittable under a permitting national discharge?
DES permit? They
That
don't-
would be the question I
You'd
had.
only have,
If you exceed, well, yeah, so is aluminum sulfate, as long as you don't exceed the level, which is lower.
But it's so little.
But So, yeah, I mean, as long as you don't exceed a certain level, it would be allowable. But you gotta look at, you know, what's the level, because potable water has copper in it already. You know, you have copper pipes that you run it through. If you were to take a sample and titrate it for copper, if the water was aggressive, you're gonna get copper. And you have surface water that's low in solids. It's suspended solids, but it's low in dissolved solids. So it's aggressive water. It's got less alkalinity and lower pH, and it would absorb copper. So that's allowable in your drinking water as long as you don't exceed the state level. You can also use that as an algicide in your
It's very commonly used in livestock tanks and rice fields, all for the same reason.
Yeah, but you gotta be careful, because this is going right into the creek. It's
So does
drinking water.
the water out of rice fields, Larry. They spill
Going right
all
into
the
a
time.
creek?
Yes.
in the waterways.
Drain ditches and creeks and all
No,
sorts of
I didn't.
places. And copper sulfate is not something they worry about. It's the insecticides or other materials they use. They have to hold water for so many days and all
Something
this.
to look
It's
into.
all regulated, but copper sulfate isn't one of them.
But I mean, we could do that, but even if you kill it and you got suspended solids, it's dead organic material that's gonna be sediment and.
No, I know
It's still gonna-
that's happening, but we could kill it, actually manage it
Yeah.
instead of ignoring it.
Yeah, you could.
And that's all I've gotten in the past is, oh, we can't do that, and no explanation why you can't do it.
Okay. Any other questions about the general manager's report? We have somebody,
I just wanted to point out, who's your CR people, with the water change in flavor. On Facebook on Saturday morning, we had people immediately coming in and saying, what's the matter with my water? Is it dangerous? It smells funny. Is it okay? And so I just want to let you know, we responded immediately with that on Saturday morning. I got hold of Bill Taylor, got the quote from him and put it right up on Facebook. So that's how we're trying to, that saves people from calling the district in a panic.
Right.
And it allows us to get it out there.
Yeah, but
We got positive response to one lady who posted, it's very fine water, and then she said, thanks so much, I love PNP, you know, it was like, well, that's nice.
Well,
You know, she got the information she needed when she made her upset.
Yeah, I don't want to say something. I think that's admirable, but I also think that makes me think to try and be more proactive. That
I asked Bill Taylor, I said, when you guys do this next year, will you please tell us in advance so that we can do it
No.
ahead of time?
we don't ask in this situation.
no, we're not gonna ask the
we
public,
should
but
just
we're gonna
make that. We should just make that a standard operating procedure. Whenever we're going to start drawing out of the reservoir, the Magalia Reservoir there, then let's put it on our website so people know. So just say, hey, a warning, we're doing this, and this is why we're doing it. And you may notice an odor and taste difference for several days or a week or whatever it might be. I think it would be good if we published that in advance. Yeah, but anyhow, that was
You guys
very
have to
nice.
tell them.
That was a good.
Okay.
It was nice to hear them say, thank you for the great response, that makes sense. That shows you that the right information.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
And that's what Kevin's staff is doing.
Very good, thank you.
I have a question under the manager's report.
Okay.
North Lake Boat Launch Land Acquisition. Surveyors working with Butte County boundary thing, but the property's not in escrow. Have we paid any money for the property yet, Kevin?
I think we've paid L&L some money for the surveying portion, but we have not paid,
SBI anything? Do we look like we're gonna be able to pay it in the next 30 or 60 days?
I think this is probably, there's no Butte County issue. I think we were waiting for confirmation from Butte County that we did not need their consent to a lot line adjustment, which they've, I believe, agreed to. This is probably sitting in George's inbox.
Oh,
I think the only, when George gets back, it'll probably be done. We'll put it in escrow, and I don't know if it'll be a 30-day or what, but I think the hangup was, as I said, we need that lot line adjustment. We told the county we don't believe we need their consent, and I believe they agreed with that, because a political subdivision of the state, such as PID, is not subject to the MAP Act. So they consented. I think it's now just a matter of somebody, George, saying, okay, let's start.
And I've got a couple, were you done?
Yep.
I've got a couple of comments, and now might be the appropriate time to, I noticed in the, in his report that the Firefly replacements is still above 100. And I'll kind of give you an overview of what's been going on. The last time I asked George if those batteries could be replaced, everybody said no, they're sealed. And so, not taking no for an answer, I went over and got together with Keith and Jim, and I got one of the old Fireflies and one of the new Zinners that had both failed, and I took them apart, and I found the source for the batteries back in Pennsylvania. I ordered a half a dozen of them. They're $10 a piece. If you buy them in quantity, we can get the set down to $16 for both of them in the Fireflies. And they are easily replaceable. Takes about 5 minutes, and they're completely watertight, so there's no issue there. When you take the cover off, it's a silicone seal, so everything inside is watertight when you put the cover back on. So we have the batteries. They can be replaced. Since speaking with Keith and Jim, they actually did some due diligence, and they contacted another water district and found out that they've been replacing the batteries for quite some time now. So they're putting together a program now. I gave everything to them, so I'm not the micromanager. I turned it over to them and said, okay, we can replace the batteries, let's do it. So we found 2 different sources for batteries. They're going to replace batteries in units, put them out in the field. We're going to monitor them, make sure that they work good, and they're going to create a program in-house where from now on, when they have a failure or a pending failure, they can use a device to determine if it's a battery, and if it is, they can simply take that cover off, replace the batteries, slap the cover back on. 5 or 10 minutes is done, and the unit's back in service. So hopefully we'll only have to replace the Fireflies that actually go bad for some other reason besides dead batteries, but the bulk of it is dead batteries. Also, the new Zinners that we are using take the same batteries. So
The thing with the new Zinners they are 20-year warranted. So if if those go out, they are completely 100% warranted.
Provided Zinner doesn't bankrupt.
Right, but they're still alive right now, so yeah. So any of the Zinner ones are warranted up to 20 years.
Right.
They are going through a process right now. We did get in touch with another district that's doing it. They said that they were having about a 50% success rate on that. So we're going to go through and do some testing of that, see if there is the ability to wake them back up if they're completely dead zone.
There's no programming issue.
But it sounds like the issue is that if the batteries go dead, it ruins the sending unit.
well, it's a little more complex than that, Ken.
Well, I'm trying to make it simple, but what they're looking at, didn't Keith say that
so lithium
they're going to test?
Lithium batteries last a long time because they go to sleep. They get an oxide coating inside, and it causes them to basically go into hibernation. Okay, and so they have to be woken up, and there's a procedure for doing that. And if the electronics, I guess the easiest way to say it is, if your heart quits beating long enough, your brain dies, and then you're dead, and there's no way to bring you back. But if we can resuscitate them before they go completely dead, we can save them and bring them back to life,
Yeah.
and give them a new life, because we're basically replacing the part that was failing, kind of like a heart transplant. So not only do they have a device reader that can do that, I've been told by Mickey now that they can actually in their programming on her computer, they can pull up the data from these readings that they've taken, and they can forecast this particular unit is going to fail, and they can have a plan to go out and change the battery before it does and renew its lifespan, basically. So that's what they're going to work out, is that program of how to do that. And, you know, even if we only save half of them, well, it's $15,000 this month, would have been $7,500 instead.
Great.
So that's a good savings.
Yep.
Anyway, the other thing that I noticed is on the processed water recycling update, which might be of interest to everybody. There's a small comment that was made in here. Let me see if I can find it. Come on, Cliff.
Is it on your screen?
Yeah.
It's on
There was-
George's. Yeah.
There's a comment in here somewhere, and it basically says that we're looking at that and other things.
Last
An alternative,
Last
yeah.
sentence.
We are also continuing to look at alternate.
Thank you.
Alter-
Thank you. So basically, I threw out there, and I'm glad Jim and guys from the plant aren't here because they probably cringe, but but I threw out that there may be an alternative to a wastewater recycling plant, and I don't think we've done all our due diligence yet, and I was quite vocal about that with George, saying that we haven't really looked at ferric chloride, for example, as a replacement, because iron is not on the hit list that aluminum is. And if we use iron, ferric chloride, instead of aluminum, we may stave off having to put in the plant and be within the discharge permit that we typically have right now, because iron, the level that we could go up to is far higher than aluminum, and we wouldn't be in violation. Now, ferric chloride is denser, it flocks better, it works at a broader pH range, it's half the price of aluminum. There's a whole lot of benefits. Now, I know the downside I've heard is if we screw up the plant operation, we got problems, you know, the people are going to complain about water, but we need to do our due diligence, because I think if it's done correctly, we could probably switch. We may have to make some changes. We could still use the same ponds that we're using for the recycled water. We're not losing that water because it's still ultimately going back in, and we're bringing it back. So when they say the recycle system is going to gain us a whole bunch of water, most of that water we're putting back anyway. Okay, so we didn't really lose it. But if we go to this, we may be able, and I'm not saying it's a for sure, but I think we need to do our due diligence, and George is looking into that. He's contacted the state since I talked to him, and he found out that there is a new water treatment plant that is in Davis, that is a co-op between Davis and Woodland, and they are successfully using ozone instead of chlorine or bromine for the pre-treatment, so there's no suspected carcinogens going back, and they're using ferric chloride to flock with, and they're getting a denser, better flock, and then they're chlorinating after the flocculation, so there's no recycled chlorine going back in. So there's a good possibility that we could eliminate having to spend 25 or 30 mil on a recycling system. And I'm going to be real forceful if I'm still on the board.
Or don't say 25.
To work with George in the background, let him take the lead on it, but for whatever knowledge I've got, to see if we can make this thing happen, because I think that would be a tremendous savings. So anyway, I just noticed that he did allude to that with his last statement there, the last sentence, and I just want to bring that up, so.
Very good. Anybody else wish to comment on the manager's report? Anybody in the public?
Are you complete?
Ditto. Okay. Right.
Yeah, very good, good.
I did, one other quick thing here on the gravel, the roads, and remember we had the bicyclist that complained?
Well, that's not on this.
That's
coming
Oh, yes, it is.
on the staff report, isn't it?
That's on the staff report, it'll be
Yeah,
separate.
that'll be coming
Oh, I
up.
thought that was a continuation of
No,
his report.
No,
My
no,
bad.
it's a staff report, it isn't
Okay.
George's report.
And I
it's a
have no additional comments on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll, see. The information, legal report.
I have 4 items. I'll try to be quick. First, the California water fix proceeding begins again tomorrow morning. This is, remember, Part 1A, or Part 1, excuse me, has been split into Parts 1A and Part 1B. So we happen to be up first tomorrow, 9 a.m. It is webcast if anybody's interested in watching it. We expect to have some very brief kind of procedural matters with the hearing officers, maybe 15, 30 minutes, and then our expert witnesses, MBK engineers, and they're modelers. Very interesting. I didn't know a lot about modeling before this proceeding, but there's only about 5 of these guys in the United States, and we've got one of the best, if not the best, in my opinion. And these modelers live in a different world. It's a modeling world. It's something else. But very complex issues that they try to summarize and present in kind of to a lay audience. So that'll be tomorrow. A very interesting presentation, I think, if you can catch any of it. And then after that, some of the other witness groups will go immediately thereafter. So there's a Feather River witness panel, Sac River witness panel, American River witness panel, and so on and so forth. So that's the update on that. Second item I have, me and some colleagues in my firm are working on the appellate brief in the test claim matter. It is due on, I believe, October 28th. There is a 15-day grace period when it's kind of funny. There's a due date, but then they give you an additional 15 days before they tell you to submit it. So technically it's due October 15th, but we may take advantage of that 15-day period just to make sure the brief is right. We're soliciting, we're actually receiving a lot of interest from statewide associations in our case. So we're expecting, it's called amicus briefs. Amicus is Latin for a friend of the court. Associations like CSDA, Aqua, League of Cities, there may be the Sanitation District Association, I forget what exactly they're called, but we're expecting some friendly briefs supportive to our side of the case. So we're working on that. And then my recollection of the hearing is that it's sometime in early 2017. I don't recall the exact date, but I'll have that at a future board meeting for you. The next item to update you on is the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan update. You'll recall this is at the top of my list as far as worries go for water right matters for the district. Actually today, the State Water Board released what they call a draft scientific basis report. This is one of the foundational documents that they will use in this proceeding to, and the goal here from the Water Board is to secure additional water supplies for environmental needs in the Delta. So this scientific basis report is kind of starting their case for why there's additional environmental water needs in the Delta. And the Water Board has not been shy about saying that basically anybody that has a water right in Northern California that has a wet connection to the Delta is potentially going to be subject to releasing more water for Delta water quality. So that's why it's at the top of my list of interest on behalf of the district. So I just wanted to make you aware that That is a real concern. Things are, albeit slowly, kind of proceeding in that process. The last item I want to update you on, I think I updated you last month, but has to do with the discussions going on in Sacramento about a long-term urban conservation mandate from the state. And you'll recall how much we all disliked the 30% mandatory reduction, especially when our own water supplies, our own planning documents called for a 10 or 20% reduction, depending on the year. And that also coincidentally caused a pretty significant hole in the district's budget as a result of that unnecessary mandatory conservation. So we didn't like that. And now what the state is talking about is mandatory water budgets. And they're saying that it would be at an aggregate level, but you would add up all the people served by Paradise Irrigation District, and each person would be entitled to 55 gallons per day, indoor use. And then there would be an outdoor irrigation use that would somewhat be variable depending on the size of the yard, your climate zone within the state, and the age of your house. But you add those two numbers up and you come up with some large number, and the state essentially would say, okay, PID, you can use no more than this number, whatever it may be. My concern with that is it really, in my view, damages the water rights system. You know, the district has senior water rights. You're in the area of origin of those water rights. You've built facilities, you've invested, you know, we as customers have invested in those facilities to use them, you know, during times of plenty water and times of drought. And here's the state saying, basically, we don't care what type of facilities or drought measures you've already taken. We're going to demand that you use no more than whatever this number is that they tell us. So I'm feeling like Chicken Little on this, that I'm real, you know, again, worried about it, but I just see it as a real infringement on water rights. So Aqua, there coincidentally was a webcast today with an Aqua committee. George is typically on it. You weren't on it, though. I attended on behalf of the district and others. The good thing is, I think me and one other person are slowly getting Aqua staff to realize this water right implication is a big deal. And some of the big, the real heavyweights in Aqua, such as Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, they're starting to see that, yeah, you've got a point here, that there is a water right issue. Yes?
Okay, Dustin, so early on you said that we hadn't perfected our water rights yet, correct?
You have 3 water rights. You have a pre-1914 water right. It's done. You've got it. Then you've got 2 post-1914 permits. And remember, the typical water right process is you go to the water board, file an application, you get a permit. And that permit has a face value. You can use, let's just use a round number, 50,000 acre feet. You can divert 50,000 acre feet for your use. Well, when you first pull that permit, and we did, our first permit was 1916. We didn't have 26,000 people in 1916. So you put a large number on your permit with the expectation that you're going to grow into it. And when you eventually grow into your water right, you go to license. And that's what we haven't done.
So if we don't do that, is that going to hurt us more if the Delta issue comes up and they say we want more water?
No. It potentially hurts you in the state mandatory conservation, because you've got a permit. You'd like to have really good years where you're really exercising that permit. You're diverting a lot of water to storage, and you're taking a lot of water out of storage because your customers are using it.
So if we had that permit perfected, then they couldn't put us on that allocation greater than the water that we were permitted already to have?
The state would say we could still put you on that allocation, but we would say we still have a property interest in the full amount of our license. So even though you say, let's use round numbers again. Let's say that the face value of our water rights, 50,000 acre feet. The state is saying your budget's 30,000 acre feet. Well, that leaves 20,000 that the state's saying we can't use. We still have a property right for the full $50,000. The state's just saying you can only use 30. That means we can most likely transfer or do something or build another facility and keep it for a drought supply. I mean, so you wouldn't use it year in and year out, but you also wouldn't forfeit it.
But if the lake is full because we're not using it because they put us on allegation and it goes over the top, don't we lose it anyway?
Well, yeah, I mean, but we don't really care about that, do we? If we've got full supplies, with the scenario we don't want to see is if we have full supplies.
Because if my lawn is dying and the water's going down to the delta, I'm not very happy because I've been put on an allocation. What good does that do me?
Yeah, I see your point. I was talking about a different thing. I mean, if we have full supplies and we can use it in the way we want, we don't care that we're spilling, right? If we like that. We like full reservoirs because we like the.
But what I'm saying is if we have that much water right and the water's there, and they come and tell us, yeah, you got it, but you can't use it.
Yeah.
Well, then it's just going to go over into the river anyway.
If we'd have known that in 1960, maybe we wouldn't have built Paradise Lake at its current size. I mean, maybe you build a smaller, cheaper reservoir. If you can't, that's the point I'm trying to make to the state is
protecting our water rights isn't going to help us if the state decides to put us on an allocation, is what you're saying, right?
It helps you preserve your property right in your water. If you have a permit, again, let's use my example. You've got a permit, not a license for 50,000, and the state says you can only use 30,000. You've got a permit. Well, since the state has put you on allocation, you can use no more than 30,000, then you're never going to have an opportunity to go to license for the full amount. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So you might as well just go to license for 30,000 under my example, and then ignore the 20,000 of acre feet that you've got on your permit.
But if we try to maximize it right now because we're looking at future growth and we have the reserve, so we maximize it, and then they come in and say, well, yeah, you got that, but we're not going to let you use it, and we got nowhere to put it anyway, and it's full, we're going to lose it anyway, right?
Well, there's a lot of ifs there. I don't know I followed them all.
It's not going to use restriction. If they're use restricting you on what you can use, it doesn't matter how much you have back here. Your use restrictions here, so who cares
Yeah,
what you have
that-
back there?
If we
I
can't
phrase
use it
that-
as fast as it rolls out of the hills and fills the lake, because they say we can't use it, and the lake is full and we got nowhere else to put it, it's going into the Sacramento River
Yeah.
and the Delta anyway.
And that's their purpose. They want more water for the environment.
So then, in other words, it really doesn't do us any good to perfect that, other than we can say, yeah, we got the water, but we can't use it.
Sure it does. You can transfer it
Where are you going to transfer it to?
to in-stream use, to Southern California, to farmers north or south of the Delta.
So if it goes over the dam and into the Sacramento River, we still going to get credit for it?
It doesn't go to the Sacramento River. It goes to Butte Creek, which is one of the creeks, or any place else in the state, it'd be a river. That's highly protected by all sorts of organizations in Chico. There's about 4 organizations, and then on top of that, there's, what do they call
Yeah,
it?
but where does Butte Creek go? Into the Sacramento River?
Yeah, after it goes through all the
Eventually.
rice fields and everything else where they
Eventually.
dump.
Well, I heard that Butte Creek used to dry up
Yeah,
before we put
I'm
the
not-
dam up there.
Yeah.
No,
Never did? I heard it did.
no,
Right.
somebody's pulling you.
Yeah, your concerns are noted. I mean, they're the same concerns I have. This isn't something we or anybody else is conceding to. I have just really big picture. What the state is saying, they're focusing exclusively on demand side, right?
Yeah.
You ought to, if you're the governor of this state, you ought to be concerned about demand for water, but you also ought to be concerned about supply. Why are you focusing exclusively on demand?
Well, yeah, basically what you're saying is that they know we got the water here, and they're gonna get it one way or the other. And if they take water around the delta, and the delta is gonna get salt water coming in from the bay, then the environmentalists are gonna say, we need more water, and where are we gonna get it? We're gonna get it from Paradise, because they got excessive water up there that they can't use because we restricted them.
They don't seem to come this far. The environmentalists stay with them. We're in Little Butte Creek watershed, they're in Butte Creek's watershed, and that's where the environmentalists are spending their time. So far, nobody has bothered to come up and ask us much questions about this stuff.
So I guess what we need to do is develop a strategy going forward that maximizes our claim for the water. I'm sure you're already looking at that.
Well, I mean, you did something earlier that I think is wise, which is creating these reserving policies and having I don't know if you call it a rainy day fund or a non-rainy day fund, but you know, these types of things, the water quality control plan update in particular, you can find yourself in an adjudication really quick. An adjudication is where a judge determines everybody's competing water rights, including the environment. And you know, it's always been perceived as kind of the nuclear option, because an adjudication of the Sacramento River would require an adjudication of the entire Bay Delta watershed. So you're going, you know, the Pitt River, your San Joaquin River, and everything in between.
Knowing what you know about all this, the legality side of it, is it a good thing or a bad thing if we were to work with Cal Water and run a trunk line down the Skyway and bank our excess water with them in their ground table and then have access to it in lean times? Does that hurt us, or would that benefit us?
From the perspective of your water rights, or from financially, or
from the state looking at the amount of water that we have and what we're using and how we're using it. If we're basically banking excess water with Cal Water and their groundwater, and then we're getting credit from them to either pay us or they got to pump it back up to us when we need it. How does that figure into the legality of what's going on with?
Well, I think just a very general answer is, the more pain and suffering you can show, if the state says you have to tighten your belt and use less water, the more type of evidence you can give me or my successor that is going to cause all of these catastrophic impacts in the district and to the environment, the more of those types of things you can tick off, the better it is. The better from an advocacy perspective.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying it would be advantageous for us to have a deal and a pipeline.
If you're only looking at it from a water right perspective. I mean, I don't want to forget the finances of that. So, I mean, you don't want to spend $50 million just because it marginally improves your water right defense, but
it does give you a buyer of water
that needs that water.
Right.
That if that water goes away, then they've got a hole in their supply.
Right. So you've just found your buyer of water.
So if nothing else, we're at least not losing that water. We're getting something for it. Right.
And you know, myself and staff, we're working on going to license, or trying to, with that 1916 permit. We're not quite ready to go to license on that later permit. And I think we've got a pretty good argument, good numbers to go to license on the 1916 permit. So we're working towards that goal.
Are you leading?
No.
You said successor.
Because an adjudication may take that. It may be my son or daughter
That long.
That's how long the adjudication will take.
Okay,
They're going to be attorneys.
Okay.
That's what they say.
But when I heard that, I did. Okay, very good.
I think Bill has a question.
Bill? Yeah.
The water part of the county has test wells to see how recharging is taking place and where. And because the groundwater basins are coming under regulation from the state, they're forming deals, and maybe the little Resource Conservation District will be involved, maybe not. But the water tables in Durham and Chico have recharged, okay, pretty much to where they were before the drought, from one good wet season. So if we make any long-range plans for selling them water, I think you ought to look into how fast their wells recharge, and they don't really need, I would say right now, to put any money into taking any water from our dams down there, because they're naturally recharging and they have good wells. And there's records of it for several years, like 10 years, and the test wells are in Durham and Chico. They're located on ag properties. I don't know if any of the Cal Waters are involved, but don't worry, their groundwater is already recharged.
Okay.
That's not good. We want them to have an incentive to pay for the pipeline.
Yeah, I know, but they don't have any incentive to pay.
They did 6 months ago.
Hey, Larry, could we get a break?
You want to take a break?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we?
My eyes are
Pretty close
turning
to it.
yellow.
Okay, we'll take a break, come back at 10-minute break. We're getting through pretty fast.
Yes, we are.
Okay, let's bring the meeting back to order. And the next item on the agenda is staff and billing reports. Any questions, Bill?
Can you pick on somebody else for the first one? Maybe I'll
I
have a
just
chance to
started
go
over
ahead.
there.
Oh, yeah, it's all logical, I'm sure.
Right. Okay.
All right, I'll start asking questions.
Okay.
I'm glad to hear that they're catching up on their patches on paving in townwide, multiple locations. They're working on an entrance to our lake maintenance road. I've looked at that, and I think it's a little bit on the shoddy side, the kind of repairs, how they're doing it. But at any rate, that's always my opinion. I had a bunch of uncles that were all builders, and most of what I see is not adequately done. I'm glad to see we installed pipe, a whole, 20 feet in May, June, and August. September, no pipe. Meter work, here's where your meters are being replaced, 37. I assume that's part of the meter, what do we call it? Anyway,
Fireflies?
Firefly.
I think that's
The leaks are going up,
That's meters,
percentage-wise or otherwise, and this is a problem because we're not replacing pipe, and we got a lot of old World War II surplus pipe that's counted in the miles, and we got a big 20 feet done. In this fiscal year,
For
we've
whose
got 20
benefit are
feet.
you doing this?
Huh?
For whose benefit are you reviewing all of this?
Well, we have public people here, and I don't know if you guys have looked at it, but I want to make a point that we're not fixing pipe. That's it. And here's the evidence of it.
Make a point that we also laid people off because of our financial problems.
Yes, and they're repairing pipe, but they're not laying any pipe.
Right.
Yes, and we laid off the lowest paid people on staff.
we haven't laid anybody off. We just haven't
Just
backfilled.
rehired.
You're
Right.
rehiring now, yeah. The gravel, I was glad to see it was explained what the problem was on page 177. When we had the lake committee, staff wasn't sure there was a problem, and they were and we got them to agree at the lake committee meeting to go out and Greg to take the fellow on a tour. I don't know if Greg did or not. He's got a sore back, and he needs some medical care he's not receiving from the district. And all you have to do is call up and talk to Greg, and he'll tell you what he needs.
I like to refute that. He is
Yeah,
being
what
taken
kind
care
of a
of
comment
by the
was that?
district in every way that we possibly
what?
can.
You mean I can't speak freely of my opinion?
No, I just need to protect the
As
district
a
from that.
board of directors, you shouldn't be talking about personnel items. That's private.
Is it?
Yes.
Might have heard something about the
I
Brown
mean-
Act?
No.
No, not you. I know
No.
you haven't heard about the Brown Act.
But to say that the district is not upholding their obligation to a worker, I think is kind of an inflammatory statement. So
It's more than inflammatory.
Well,
It's
all
a
I can
lie.
say is, do something
It is
about
a
it.
lie.
It's necessary for me to say something.
It is a lie.
I'll contact Greg
You
tomorrow
want to
to
say
make
it's a lie?
to make sure
I'm
that he's getting
saying
taken care of.
you're lying. You, Bill, you are lying. Understand that? Did it sink in yet?
Okay, do you have any more?
I'm going to go on with my report.
Just stick with the staff reports, don't give.
I'm sticking,
the
this is
editorial.
staff, here's a PID lake comparison chart. We're doing okay, but not as good as last year. Well, this thing's been ignored for the last 2 or 3 meetings, so, at any rate, you asked me to be first, Larry, so you're getting it.
I just said stick to the staff report.
No, I'm sticking with staff report.
Why don't we all stick to being professional here and respecting each other, and let's just do what we're put here to do.
Any rate, and we haven't had a fine or any talk of a fine for some reason, for some time with the water treatment plant, in part because of the low flows we've been treating. And it hasn't been necessary, and the plant's been doing an excellent job of managing the aluminum and the chlorine applications. So, in spite of what some people say about us being set up for $10,000 a month fines, it simply hasn't happened, and there's the evidence of why it hasn't happened. Again, we're losing water. You can do it on percentages and otherwise on page 185, and it is going. It's gone up, and now it's come down a little bit, but it's still going up. Aquahawk is not gaining. It's basically flattened out. We get reports at the water conservation meeting about it, and it's gone up. And it'd be nice to have, I can't think of it, Mickey to come and report on Aquahawk, because that's one of her prime responsibilities. And I don't need to look at a chart for water conservation consumption. That's why we're not getting the money into the district, and that's the end of the thing.
Cliff?
At a interview I had today, the comment was brought up about how I felt about the bicycle traffic on the heavily gravelled road up on the lake, and whether or not I thought that we should close that to public bicycle riding to the public and use it only for maintenance, or whether we should fix it, or whether we should just let them keep complaining. And I didn't really have a good answer, but I see that somebody's taken note of it here, because I've got a picture of one that looks passable and one that looks too heavily gravelled, and I'm wondering what has been done about that. Are we going to go out and spread that gravel out to make everybody happy, or are we going to leave it like it is, or what?
They're supposed to come back to the lake committee and give a report on it.
Who's
And
they?
The staff, Jim Pastorini.
Okay, up at the plant, okay.
The guys that work for him on the lake, and George on the graveling and how to do something with it. And in the report there, they mentioned that they're looking into what they could do about spreading the gravel, doing something about the heavy gravel pieces. When we were in the lake committee, they talked about it being, didn't describe exactly what was wrong. The bicyclist was here and described it, and we talked about having this tour with, seeing this with the staff. And you've got the brief report, and I hadn't heard anything since the lake committee, and the next lake committee meeting will be in November. We skipped a month, and it's going to be toward the end of November. Right, Larry?
Yes.
Larry serves on the committee with me. Maybe you have something you'd like to share with Cliff on it.
I'm not a bicyclist, so
Jim mentions in the staff report that cost-effective methods to tighten the gravel to avoid tire ruts are being considered.
I'm sorry,
I didn't hear you. Yeah.
it's in the staff report.
Cost-effective methods to tighten the gravel to avoid the tire ruts are being considered.
Being considered, okay.
Anything else in the staff report?
No, that was all I had.
Ken?
Yeah, I have something. Kevin, would you go to the unallocated water loss chart? I can't, 186, I think. There it is. Okay, I want to compliment the staff for our unallocated water numbers are going down. You can see the red line. That's the volume of water. You can see where it was back in 2009, where it was in 1997. And if you look back for the last 3 years, 2013 through now 2016, it's pretty much a level line. It is not going up, as Director Kellogg states. That's his way of doing math. But the real water that is being lost is less than it has ever been. I wanted to bring that up for the clear the record, and as some other directors like to do, just bring it up because I want to bring it up. The other things I've already talked to staff and Kevin about, so I am finished with those.
Okay, that's it. Okay, I've always heard that if you have less than 10% loss of water, that you're doing very good. So I think our staff is doing a very good job also. And I have no other questions on the staff report. I'd entertain a motion. I move that we accept the staff report as for September 2016. Staff and billing report.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 You say aye? You're not accepting them?
No?
Okay, 3-1. Okay, treasurer's report.
Yeah, my written report. The big thing was that we got the audit completed this last month and presented to the board. I think that was the highlight of our last month and a half. The other thing is that the refinance went through without any hiccups. Actually, there was, I don't know if I let the board know, but there was one hiccup at the end that they were requiring a certified auditor to certify one of our debt service covenants based on one of the appendices in one of our loans that we've had outstanding that they kind of caught at the last minute. And so I was able to get a hold of that borrower, go to their upper management, have them waive the requirement. And that was, we were closing at 12 and the email came in at 10:30 a.m. So that was kind of a pressing point, but we got it done. And so that loan was actually funded and now it's been refinanced. So
I deal with that all the time, Kevin.
I don't know how your ticker handles it. I was a little nervous. If you turn to page 194, kind of explain this a little bit. Right now, I'm estimating that we're $227,000 behind budget. But I also want to caveat that with that these are based on our old collection percentages. And if you remember before, we had variable rates or tiered rates. So meaning that the higher the consumption, the more revenue, or the higher your rates were. So you would see probably a big curve like this, and then you would come down during the lower months and like this. Well, this is kind of how my projection's based too, similar to that, same type of curve. I don't know if that's how this collection will be because we don't have tiered rates anymore. So we could see this actually going down or collecting more than what I expected to be budgeted in the lower months based on that we have now that one level tier or one level consumption rate going forward. So I would suggest or suspect that at the low, when we get into the Novembers and Decembers, it's definitely not going to go lower than what we have projected, but I would assume that we maybe see some increase on that. So that's where we're at right now. But again, remember, we budgeted based on 90% of 2014's consumption. And we'll just kind of see how that goes with where we're at. We have a cushion in there, so we can absorb some of these losses, and then we can kind of feel out what we're estimating as we get through the year. So with that, I can take any other questions.
It says on training, I will be attending government tax update in San Francisco,
Correct.
December the 12th through the 14th, and
Yep.
I will be attending the annual. How much do these cost?
The government tax update normally costs about $900 all in, travel and that. And the government finance officers is normally $1,500 to $1,800 to attend all in.
Talking about $2,400?
Yeah. And normally those, I mean, I go to a few trainings here and there, but these are my ones that I normally annually go to. The government tax update gives you all of the payroll tax, all of the HR stuff, the Obamacare type of stuff that comes through, any of that. It's a real good update that gives you a nice, good look and kind of goes over those highlights. And then the Government Finance Officers Association is kind of the broad spectrum one that.
Okay, I look at it and say we're in tough financial shape, and it's $2,500 you could save the district and probably get most of this information online. Now, I'm sure you don't feel that way, but at any rate, that's my comment.
I hear you.
Cliff? I have no comments on that, but this, is this part of the update on the gateway status update? Is that the next item, or is that part of?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I forgot. Yes, the gateway status update. Thank you. I forgot that's in the back of my thing. Okay. Mickey put together a gateway status update that talks about the transition from the AT&T, or no, is it the Verizon, to the AT&T to the T-Mobile. That's right. And how why we transitioned those two service providers and how it went.
So, and of course, Zinner would love to sell us the new units, rather than, yeah.
So
All of the money
I like
there.
to say I went Cliff on this one because it did come to me and said this is what they're recommending because AT&T is no longer, and I go, well, what's inside these things? They're just cards. So we need to shop this and see if there's another provider. And so she was able to go and shop that. So
Good.
Okay. Ken? Your third?
I'm good.
Okay. You have any comments on the financial?
No.
Treasurer's report?
No.
I don't either. Anybody in the public? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we accept the treasurer's report as presented.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposed, 4-0. Okay, director's comments. We've got a whole hour.
Yeah,
No, we don't have to use it.
let's save some of it.
Okay.
That was Tim.
Bill says that I'm picking on him. We'll start with Ken.
Thank you very much, Larry.
I'd like to pass her right now.
Okay.
Oh, you're gonna give it to me?
Yep.
Okay, well, another, I think, productive meeting. However, I think all of us here need to learn a little more manners on this board and not be so aggressive. As my wife has taught me and constantly reminds me, we can respectfully disagree, but we don't have to get in everybody's face. It looks unprofessional, it is unprofessional, and it makes us unproductive. So please think about it before you point at somebody and push them up against the corner, because they're going to push back, and it's downhill from there. That's my only comment.
Oh, I had a father who disciplined me very strongly. He would stand in front of me and chew me out, for whatever occasion it happened to be, and I couldn't say anything back. At the dinner table, he controlled the conversation, and I couldn't say anything. And it turned out to be very good training. Because when Ken does his stunts, I just sit here and listen, because it's not going to bother me. It's not as bad as my father. It's elementary, and I've had people working with it come up and scream in my face, and then I would reach over and say, "Now, Ken, do you feel better?"
But see, now, you're doing just exactly what I asked.
Can't comment on it.
Well,
And I'm sorry, but Ken was out of line, and now you're out of line.
yeah, you're right. And my wife is going to be mad at me when I get
And I wish you guys would just get along and agree to disagree on the things that you hold a different opinion on, and respect each other. Is that too much to ask?
Okay. Yeah, you're really not supposed to comment on the other director's comments.
I apologize.
But I didn't want to get in your face.
I
so-
apologize.
Ken, did you want to say anything?
Yes, I will. Now that Cliff has brought this up, I tend to agree with him that Bill just started going off at the mouth and kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until we had to snap back. And that's what happened.
So,
This is not for discussion. That's exactly what happened. When a director starts criticizing the district and dropping off these little pearls of wisdom about, well, the district is not letting this individual get the medical attention that he needs, what is this director doing to the district? That's just sowing dissension. No, I'm not done.
You're not done, okay.
We have, like you said, an hour. I think it's an hour and a half. And I can only let this director rant and rave about these things. You know, the thing about the water, the thing about the pipe. Oh, you're going to have your own conversation, huh? The thing about the pipes, not getting pipe in the ground, only 20 foot in. What are we doing here? We're just doing that. Well, where has Director Kellogg been for this entire calendar year when we have cut back staff? We haven't replaced people. We didn't hire the temporaries in the summer. We didn't put pipe in the ground because we did not have the capability of doing that. But will that comment ever come up? No, it's just, well, look at what a crappy job the leader of the district is doing because we clearly aren't taking care of this old rusty pipe. And look at the water loss going up. Well, it's not going up. Look at the water loss. You measure them out in gallons or ounces or acre feet, it's down. It's been down for many years. It's been consistently down for the last 3 years. It's not going up. And why irritate the public? Oh, that's right. I know the answer to that. So the public will vote for a recall for everybody. That's right. I forgot all about that. My goodness. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with this meeting as it went on. We did have a relatively productive meeting. Things moved right on along. And then we get up to where all of this non-essential stuff that was on a peach box, a soapbox, a political stance, to stand up and yell out to the public, and look how crowded it is, that we're such bad people here at the district. And I'm here to tell the public that we are not bad people. Well, maybe there is a bad person, but I'm not real certain about that. I think perhaps just and maybe I won't go there. But anyhow, I tend to think that, I would have really liked Bill's father. I'm done.
Okay, good. No, we're not supposed to talk back and forth on the comment.
No, I would like to make a comment, though.
You've already made
because
yours.
I think it makes sense.
You've already made yours.
Yeah, we don't.
An observation.
We don't talk back and forth on it. You can do it next time. My comments are that I enjoyed the meeting tonight. It was short and sweet, and I'm proud of what the district has done in 14 years that I've been aboard. And I have no regrets. And we're adjourned.
Now that we're adjourned, I can say whatever I want.
Yeah, you can. We're not meeting.
Both of you were right.